I am Diane Lucas, and welcome to Book 101. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years, and today I have my special guest. He's the author of several books, no other than Mr. Don Bishop.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Welcome to Book 101, Mr. Dan. And can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah. Well, as you said, my name is Don Bishop. I write as T.S. Pedramon. My real name is no secret. I actually have my own podcast as well, but so in the podcast I use my real name. But my book, and it's only one book so far, is published under the name T.S. Pedramon.
So why did you decide to have a pen name?
Just to kind of have some separation from my personal life and my books. Also, I had heard that if you write in multiple genres, you can confuse Amazon's algorithms. Now I've heard recently that you don't have to worry about that anymore. But I had thought, maybe I'll write fiction under this pen name, and then if I ever write nonfiction, I'll just use my real name. But yeah, if you write, sometimes if you write completely different genres under the same name, then they'll come up in search results under the same name,
Yes.
And some people are looking for fantasy, and some people are looking for romance, and some of those people do not want the other category. They don't care about it, and so it kind of messes up your search results for people trying to look for a genre. So
Sounds interesting, Mr. Dan. So what are your long-term and short-term goals in writing and podcasting?
Well, I'll answer podcasting first because it'll be a shorter answer, I think. It's just to continue as I am. Perhaps some differences. So I in my podcast, I like to do kind of what you're doing right now. I talk to other authors, and I kind of probe like the different aspects of writing and publishing. And so I have an episode that's all about what is gamelit. Another one about what is Christian fantasy. That one's not out yet. I'm working on editing that episode. But yeah, I'm going to keep doing that, and occasionally share stories directly in the podcast, like narrate short stories. With writing, I have lofty ambitions for myself that I cannot. I have not found it possible yet to write as much as I intend to. So with Nightshade Unicorn, it's actually not the first series I planned. My podcast is called the Grand Hill Chronicles podcast, and that's named after the Grand Hill Chronicles, which is begun and it's not finished. It's not published. You can read part of it on royalroad.com, and also on thorn.link/grandhill, and on Wattpad. But anyway, with the Grand Hill Chronicles, I started working on that in 2010, and over the past several years now, since I don't know, about 2019, 2020, I started getting serious about looking at writing as a career. And as I started looking at things really seriously and getting into author groups on Facebook and talking with other members of the writing community, I started to realize that I am too entrenched with the Grand Hill Chronicles. I have an idea, and I want it to come out the right way, and it was going to take me too long. And so I kind of set it on a back burner and turned my focus to something new, because then I didn't have all the emotional attachment for the vision that I had without having the skill to make that vision real. And with something new, I can be like, okay, I have this new vision, but the idea is to get it out. And if I kind of find my way into a new version of this vision along the way, that's fine. So with Nightshade Unicorn, I had the idea for it about 2 years ago. I started writing it early last year, and more like developing the idea. Early last year, I started more developing the idea. And then middle of the year, I started really pounding it out. And so once I jumped on that, I published the book on February 28th of this year. So that's book 1. Book 2, because you asked about writing goals. Book 2, short term, I'm trying to publish it August 28th. I'll tell you right now, I'm behind because I've had a lot of things in my life get in the way of writing. But there's this nifty thing called dictation that I did a lot of dictation for Nightshade Unicorn book 1, Forerunner. For Guardian, that's book 2. I am trying to ramp up my dictation game. So with book 1, I did most of the dictation right here at my computer. I did some dictation. Did I do any in the car? I don't think so. Driving, but I did some of it walking on a treadmill, and some of it actually treading water in a swimming pool. But one problem with the way I was doing the dictation that slowed me down is that I was doing it speech to text immediately, like speech to text in real time with Microsoft Word. And it's not too terrible at it. It's so, but and I would tell myself that I'm going to go back and correct the errors later, but I'm still watching it on the screen to make sure it comes out right. And this time I'm abandoning that. So I have a little portable microphone, and yeah. So the other day, I got a chapter out driving to an appointment. I set the microphone. Actually, I tied it to the sun visor on the ceiling, and then I just left it up there, and I talked while I drove. So that gave me the opportunity to write a chapter while I was busy doing something else, while I was driving. And then yesterday evening, I dictated not a chapter, but a few hundred words while out for a short walk. So probably way more information than you were looking for, but these are my goals, to get it out in time. I'm trying to speed things up, and with book 1, I had a broad vision, and I knew where book 1 was going to go from start to finish, and I was hazy on the in-between. And so when I got through the first bit and the story was set up, I found myself like, now what am I doing? So I've taken to jotting some ideas, some plot ideas in this notebook, and right here it's like the kinds of notes that I'm writing is, so here's Allabva, the main character. Where is she right now? She's at this place. She's hungry. She has this going on. She thinks this is going to happen. So I'm writing kind of character states, and then I take that and I talk out what's going to happen next. Backing up, because you asked about goals, and I'm sorry, I got book 1 out February 28th. Book 2, I actually promised in the back of book 1 for August 28th. That's
the second
right
one.
there, printed in the back. Coming soon. August 28th. No, I did say I'm behind. It might not be available in print. It might only be ebook, but I don't know. Readers can check in. They can subscribe to my newsletter. Now I'll let them know when things are coming out.
Well, congratulations for sharing your talents to the world. So, what inspired you to become an author or a podcaster?
I've always had ideas that I want to share, but in 2009, my wife got me into NaNoWriMo. That's National Novel Writing Month, and the idea behind NaNoWriMo is to write a 50,000 word novel during the month of November. So I attempted that in 2009, and I got like 1,500 words into it, and I didn't know how to crank it out. Same thing in 2010. I attempted it. I didn't get very far, but I had an idea that I thought was really cool, and that is the Gren Hill Chronicles. It started with NaNoWriMo in 2010. I still didn't know how to crank it out. I figured out how to make myself do that last year is when I finally achieved that, and I did that with book 1 of Nightshade Unicorn. But yeah, I got encouragement from my wife because I had always wanted to, and then kind of thought, who am I to think I can do that? And she was like, no, of course you can. And I would say that to other people, of course you can. It might not be the next, to put yourself in the fantasy genre, it might not be the next Wheel of Time epic fantasy series, but you have your story in your head and you can write it down, and it won't be perfect. In fact, I have a reminder on the wall in front of me: write a lousy book, then fix it. So yeah, it's just encouragement from my wife. And with podcasting, that was because I wanted to share what I was writing, and the original idea there was to share what I was writing and share the world building behind it.
Very well said, Mr. Don. But before we go on, I want to shout out my listeners in which country? Of course, in South Korea. Annyeonghaseyo, South Korea. Thank you for listening to this podcast, because in Incheon I got 87% audience share, Seoul at 6, Gyeonggi-do at 5, Gyeongbokdo, North Gyeongseong, or Gyeongdo-sang-do. I don't know if I pronounced correct, but thank you in South Korea.
Annyeonghaseyo, everyone.
Yes. Annyeonghaseyo, South Korea, for supporting this podcast, because this podcast is created to empower writers, authors all over the world, like Mr. Don Bishop. Can you tell us about your writing process?
Yeah, and I think I kind of got touched on that earlier because I talked about dictation. And I would guess that I probably dictated a little bit more than half of book 1 of Nightshade Unicorn. But so it starts with an idea, right? And some people start with a character and just like, this character is like this, their personality, and then they put the character in a setting. I have a setting, well, ish, yeah. I kind of start with a concept of the world or the plot. With the Nightshade Unicorn, it started with the Nightshade Unicorn. I thought, well, I'm too entrenched with the Gren Hill Chronicles. I want to do something different so that I can actually produce it in some kind of timely fashion. And so what's different? Or what's going to be an interesting twist on something that people know? Well, unicorns. Okay, so what would be unexpected about a unicorn? How about if the unicorn were dark somehow, like angry, maybe evil? And so Nightshade Unicorn. Why does the Nightshade Unicorn exist? What does that mean? And what What are the implications? And what magic does this Nightshade Unicorn do? So I built off of that idea, and I don't want to go too far into detail because it'll do a spoiler for book 1. But yeah, I started with that, and then I decided that Allabva would be the human main character who has to learn about these things, has to learn about the Nightshade Unicorn and face danger in this world. Then, of course, if it's going to be an interesting story, there have to be stakes. There has to be some problem to solve. In this case, it's a pretty classical. For epic fantasy, it's a pretty classical problem. The world is in danger, you know. And then I had to think about what the world is in danger from, and what is the main character supposed to be able to do about it, even if she doesn't know it at the beginning. So,
Mr. Dunn, how do you develop your characters and plot lines?
For characters, I don't know if I'm very good at developing characters. Read it and you tell me how well I develop the characters. I mean, I've heard good things from people who tell me about it. I don't have a lot of readers yet, but the reviews I have on Amazon are good. But my daughter came and she ordered me to hurry up and write book 2 because she loved it. So for the main character, I kind of have an idea in my head of what she is like. And I do this with people in the real world, is I form an idea of what that person is like, and how I would interact with that person. And with this main character, I put a lot of myself into it, like how I would respond to things or how I would think about things. I put a lot of myself into her. With bad guys, I can't really do it the same way exactly. It's pretty similar, actually, though. So I have a villain named Nilin, and he's just kind of a rotten character. And I decide what kind of person he needs to be to make the story interesting. And then I think about, like, what would this person do? How would this person behave? And so, he behaves in a derisive manner. He's rude, he's condescending, and he doesn't really care how other people feel. So I guess that's, in a nutshell, is to decide what this person is like, and then think about how this person would behave given different circumstances. And then to develop plot lines, there's so much talk in the author space about how to develop a plot line, about how to write. And they talk about plotting versus pantsing, or planning versus discovery writing. With me, I'm a bit large scale. I'm a plotter. Mini scale, I'm a discovery writer. So I go into a scene knowing what needs to come out of it, and then I jump in and put myself in the POV character's point of view, and go about what does this character want? What is this character trying to achieve? And then put him in the situation and see what plays out. And if it doesn't play out, if it doesn't want to play out as I think the plot needs to, then I need to fix something. Like, maybe I need to adjust my ideas about the plot overall, or maybe I add in some device that will change the situation so that the necessary outcome does happen. So, like with Nightshade Unicorn, I had an idea of where it was going to end. Actually, I wrote, let's say I wrote about that much before I went and wrote the end. And all this stuff in the middle, I had to figure out, like, how are we going from here to here? And that was just kind of hashing out what's going to be necessary, what's going to be interesting along the way. Yeah.
So, Mr. Dunn,
Sonic is falling off
how
my
do
wall.
you handle writer's block when you're writing Nightshade Unicorn?
That is, yeah. I actually did my own podcast episode about that question, about writer's block. And with this, like I said, once I had the story set up, I kind of hit a wall, like what's next? And it was really frightening because I had word count goals because I was really trying to get this book written. And if I didn't know what needed to happen next, how was I supposed to write it? But I had word count goals, so I better write something, right? So one time, maybe twice, I was just like, I'm at a turning point in the story, but I need to know what happens next before I can write it. So I took a day off of writing that novel, and I still wrote something else to just kind of pull myself out of it a little bit and change my thinking. So I stepped out of the novel and I wrote a short story on the side. That was one thing. But if, apart from that, it's stepping back and again asking myself, where is this going? What does the main character not know? When does the main character need to learn that? And how should the main character learn that? And so some of my writing, when I wasn't sure what should happen next, was saying, what does the main character need to know? Who knows that? And how are they going to convey that information?
Mr. Dunn, before we go on, I'm inviting you to listen to my other podcast, Food 101, our fourth season, and with my partner, Chef Alessandro, one of the best executive chef in one of the five-star hotel in downtown Toronto. So please do listen, Food 101, because of our Food 101 podcast, we do our merchandise. Please do visit our Etsy and Shopify website. If you're looking for any products under the sun, like pet hoodie, jigsaw puzzle, face towel, and men's sports warm-up hoodie, we have it all, people. So please do visit our Food 101 merchandise. And speaking of Food 101, I'm plugging of course, my culinary course. Please do visit our culinary course, Food 101, Volume 1 Basics, until Volume 3. It's all already out, and you can purchase this online culinary course to make your food delicious and good in the kitchen. So, Food 101 Volume 1 Basics. If you want to enroll to this online class, you will learn the culinary basics, ingredients, flavors, and a lot more. So please do enroll, people, on our culinary course, Food 101, on our fourth season. So, Mr. Don, what challenges have you faced in your writing career?
Having time to write, huge challenge. With a family, with wife and kids, and a full-time job. I currently don't have a day job. Like, writing is my day job right now. I want to keep it that way. I have some savings, and I have a little bit of a runway to try to get this author thing off the ground. I have book 1 out. Book 2 is coming. I'm employing strategies to increase my audience. I have a newsletter, so I can let people know when book 2 is coming, and I like to share short stories in my newsletter as well. But time is a huge challenge. You need time to write. There's also writer's block, and there's there's and writer's block doesn't mean that you can't write. It means that you are not accepting the random ideas that come to you, and you're looking for a certain you're looking for a certain aesthetic in what you're writing. And so I think that can be a hurdle to overcome, because you have to maybe release some of the need for that aesthetic and just write something. Like I said earlier, write a lousy book and then fix it. Like you can't correct it if it doesn't exist, and you're going to have to correct it. It's not going to be perfect the first time. But yeah, having time to write is a huge thing, and knowing how to push yourself to keep writing, and overcoming your own excuses. Like, I don't have a good idea right now, so I can't write. No, it's kind of an excuse. Maybe look at something from a different way. Sometimes you legitimately can't. Like, you're super tired, you're exhausted, and that happens. But yeah, having
So,
time to
Mr.
write.
Dunn, are you traditional or indie author?
I'm indie.
So, what are the pros and cons of being an indie author?
Well, the first con off the bat is that you don't have an audience off the bat. With traditional publishing, you at least have some audience. It might not be big at all. Also, with traditional publishing, you probably get an advance with your book deal, and maybe that's a couple $1,000s, depending who you are, depending how big your name is, and how many books the publisher anticipates selling. But with indie publishing, there's no advance, obviously, because you are the publisher. Like, pay yourself, I guess. But one huge pro with indie publishing is control. There are some sad stories in traditional publishing. Sometimes an author has a book deal and they get their advance, and then the publisher decides not to publish it, and for whatever reason. And typically the publisher still holds the rights, and so now the work doesn't get published, and the author can't even say, okay, if you're not going to publish, I'm going to go and publish on my own. They can't do it because the publisher has the rights. Sometimes those rights expire after, I don't know, 2 years, 7 years, depending on what the contract is with the publisher. But with indie, like, that doesn't exist. I hold my own rights. I can publish where I want to, when I want to. And I can, I have full control, full creative control, full financial control. But again, huge downside is that I don't have anybody else pushing to sell my book. There's nobody else trying to sell my book. And so, like, if I'm going to get out there and do book sales or author signing events, I have to coordinate that myself. But on the other hand, the royalties are bigger. Like, there's no office staff to pay salaries to. It's just there's cost of printing, and depending on the marketplace, there may be some other costs. So, like, with this, I have a physical book in my hand right now. This was printed by a service called Ingram Spark, and they charge me a certain amount for the printing based on, how much paper, how much, how big it is. So there's a cost of printing, there's a cost of shipping it to me, and then I go to, I have an event this Saturday, and I have another event the next Saturday, and I'm going to go to those events, and when I sell a book, there's nobody else to pay royalties. There's no, it's just me. I do have to pay sales tax, and if they pay with a credit card, I pay credit card processing fees, but that's fairly small. It's, on the scale of 3% of the cost of the book. So 3% for the processing fees, 8% for the sales tax. So that's like 11% for that. The printing cost and the shipping to get it to me, I paid that. The rest of it is just all mine. I keep it.
What advice do you have for aspiring writers out there?
Write a lousy book. Just get it out. It's not going to be wonderful the first time. Maybe it will. Congratulations if it is. Assume that it will not be, so that you can get rid of that stupid bar that you're trying to get over of producing a perfect book. Just get rid of it. Write the book. And then when you have something to look at, that's something you can fix, and that's something you can improve, and you'll be able to look at it and see what it is needing. So write it, and don't be scared, and don't be afraid to share it with somebody. Get feedback. Do get feedback, but don't get feedback from one person, and don't get feedback from your mom. Caveat: yeah, sure, if you want to get feedback from your mom, that's great, but chances are fair that your mom doesn't really read in your genre. Maybe she does, but my mom doesn't. My mom would not be a good person to get feedback on for my novel. My wife may be better. She does read some fantasy, but even still, that's like she's too close to me. She cares about how I feel about it. So get feedback from strangers, and get feedback from multiple strangers, and know that any one stranger is probably not going to be right. Like if you share it with 30 people and one person is saying it's awful because it has this problem, and maybe they make a good point, but the other 29 people think it's great, well, maybe that one person has a good point, but nobody else cares. Maybe it's a great book. So C.S. Lewis's Narnia, The Chronicles of Narnia, Tolkien, J.R.R. Tolkien, took issue with having a faun and Father Christmas or Santa Claus in the same story, because they come from different cultural references. Where the faun is from Greek mythology, and then Santa Claus is from Christian tradition. So to have them in the same story is just kind of sloppy. And, Tolkien has a good point with that. He's kind of right. But nobody cares. Everybody loves the Chronicles of Narnia. So write the book, get feedback from multiple people, and you can choose to disregard if one person, or maybe multiple people, are... In fact, you can disregard all 30 of them. If all 30 are saying the same thing and has the same problem, you have the power to disregard that. Just realize that you're probably not going to get a lot of sales, and people aren't going to love the book. So consider feedback as appropriate.
Very well said, Mr. Dunn. So, Nightshade Unicorn, Forerunner, what is your hope for your debut novel or series?
Right now, I hope that people read it and review it, because I have all of 3 ratings on Amazon, and that makes it difficult to generate sales online, because people, when they go shopping online, they look at the reviews, they look at the ratings, and if you're looking at 2 books and you're considering which one to buy, and then one of them has a 4.6 star rating out of 3 people that reviewed it, and the other one has a 4.2 star rating out of 4,000 people that reviewed it, you're going to say, well, maybe those 3 people didn't, maybe I'm not like them. But these 4,000 people, they didn't think the book was as good as this book that has a 4.6 rating, but it's a safer bet, So if you do read the book, please review it, because that really helps other people find it, helps other people discover it. As I said, I've heard really good feedback from people who have read it, not just my daughter, but from strangers. And my daughter has shared it with her friends at school, and they've come back saying it was awesome. So yeah, I would encourage people to read it. It's a good story. I think so, and other people have thought so. I do have reviews from strangers. So it's not just me. It's not just people who care about how I feel.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Read it and review it so other people can find out.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Don Bishop, because if we support him, more series to come. Let's support authors all over the world. Mr. Don, can you please invite our listeners to support your Nightshade Unicorn Forerunner?
Of course, yeah. And you could do that by going to, remember my pen name is TS Pedramon. So if you go to pedramon.com, there are links. If you want to buy it on Amazon, you can. If you want to buy it directly from my store, you can. And there are other links for other vendors. But yeah, Nightshade Unicorn. In fact, if you're driving right now and you can't write down Pedramon, then remember Nightshade Unicorn, because that's also nightshadeunicorn.com, and it has the links from there. Of course, maybe you don't want to buy it yet. Maybe you want to think about it. Maybe you want to wait, so you can join the newsletter, and there are links again at pedramon.com and at nightshadeunicorn.com. There's a link to join my newsletter. It's absolutely free, and you can unsubscribe anytime. But that way, I can let you know when the next book is out, and when I'm able, I will share extras, short stories, just for free.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Don. So, Mr. Don, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
More to come, people. See you soon.